if you're choosing to make a monster, I'm gonna show you how to go from this to this. Well, not exactly, because this is a different monster, but this is gonna be our finished product. We're gonna use a blanket stitch. This is just a simple stitch to keep it on the fabric, but I will show you how to do that in just a few easy steps. First, you're gonna pick out your monster. They should be cut out already. And I will let you know that this is more of like a guideline. So if you want to add more space here, you absolutely can. I would recommend getting to a stopping point here and maybe like making it his arms a little skinnier, whatever you want to do. If you want to do it this way, we'll be fine. So then you'll pick your fabric. We have a lot of really cool fabric that was graciously donated to us. I think this is gonna make a pretty cool monster, so I am going to pick this, and then we're going to make a big enough space. And to make this the easiest on you, you're gonna wanna fold it in half, and you're gonna wanna trace at a fold. So I'm thinking here should be good, and I want his feet to be our matching point. Okay, so I'm gonna fold it inside out. All the better to trace with. Your fabric doesn't have to be super lined up, at least for your first like major cut, but you want to make sure that your monster has plenty of room, and there's plenty of room for you to cut around. So you want to do enough space around. Once you have your fabric cut out, you're gonna want to make sure that you have this pressed nice and flat. Then you'll grab your marker. We have washable markers here, so don't worry about any mess. And then you're gonna press down and just start your tracing. Depending on your fabric, you're gonna wanna make sure that you can at least see most of your monster. And then you'll go around just tracing, and like I said, it can be like a rough trace. And if you're worried about something being too tight for you to sew once you get started, you can go a little bit wider. This is generally a super easy, albeit time-consuming craft. But once you get going, it really isn't that bad. Okay, whoop, let's fix, maybe, come back here. Okay, and as you can see, we have a pretty good outline here. You want to make sure that you trace over any spots you think you might have problems with, but I should be good. and then we're gonna get to cutting. As you're cutting, you wanna make sure that you keep your fabric together so that at every point, your fabric matches up. The best way to do that is just to keep readjusting where your hand is as you're cutting and making sure that your fabric is pulled tight together. And it's okay if they're not 100% perfect, but this is going to help you in the long run. So I highly recommend paying attention as you're going, making sure that your fabric is still nice and together. See how well that matches up? That's a little bit different, but for the most part, oops, we're staying pretty even, which is really what we want to see. Okay, now that we have our monsters cut out, we're going to flip him and you'll see what he's gonna look like once we get to sewing. Depending on your fabric, and this is some pretty tough fabric, whenever you cut it, it might not match up 100%. That is okay. You can go ahead and trim stuff off if you really want to, but with the blanket stitch, it should be pretty easy to hold stuff together no matter what. I am just gonna give that a little trim. But everything else seems to match up pretty okay, which I am happy about because this is some pretty tough fabric. It's very pretty though, so I guess it'll be worth it. And if you start sewing in a place and you don't like how it's matching up, taking an extra second to fix it will make you feel a little bit better, and then it'll make your monster look a little bit more cohesive. If you're not really worried about that, don't worry about it. It'll look really cool either way. Your monster doesn't have to be perfect because A, it is a monster, and B, nothing is perfect. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and get started with the sewing. Here we go. Oh wait, yeah, okay. Okay, so to get started with our sewing, I wanted to go ahead and show you guys that you can customize your little monsters to your heart content. We have lots of little pieces of fabric like this. We also have, I mean, you can use any of the other fabric you have, or we have for you in these boxes to put anything that you want on their faces. I recommend doing this before you start sewing up the arms and legs, and then before we start stuffing. It just will make your life a lot easier in the end. And that's really all we can ask for. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started and show you the easiest way to add your face to your monster. Step one of this is to find a thread color you want. We have lots of thread options, and you're gonna knot at one end. That's not a very good. For the record, having a short tail for all of your threads, especially during this craft, is going to be your best friend. So I'm gonna be trimming the tail of this one a little bit before I carry on. But let's just get knotted and then we'll get started. Lord have mercy. Okay, well that's a mess. But it's okay. It's gonna be on the inside anyway. So I'm gonna start with his mouth, which I think here. I'm gonna trim this just a tiny bit just to match these up. And if you want to make your own absolute fangs, go for it. This, for me, is just super easy, so I'm doing it that way. All right. We're gonna pick our one side up, and we're going to just poke through. Maybe. I will let you know, my white fabric has the glue on the back, so it's going to be a little bit harder for me than it would be for most of you. I will recommend using the part of your fabric that is not going to have the white part in it. But if you want to take that extra minute, that's certainly up to you. So just wrap it like that. And then we'll pick another corner. Maybe. We want right here. Good enough for me. Okay, so there's one edge of his mouth, and then we'll move to the next edge. Just gonna be right around in here, I think. Nope. And this is gonna be something that you mess around with yourself. It's gonna be a little bit trial and error, and it's not gonna be perfect. So I just want you to get that out of your brain right now. Your monsters are perfect when they're not perfect. Ah, okay, you. If I could just find, there. And then you just go right over the top, right at the edge of your other fabric. Whoops. Get in there. Technical difficulties. Okay, so then we're gonna pick another spot. And okay, so to knot the back of this, I'm just gonna go underneath here. And then I'll knot it. And it'll be the same for anything that you want to put on the back of your monster, well, or the face of your monster. So for time's sake, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to actually the blanket stitch. Blanket stitch is pretty easy, although getting into the rhythm of it is a little bit difficult, especially if you've never done anything like this before. So I'm going to try my best to walk you through it as easily as I can. As you can see, that's a pretty good looking mouth, if I say so myself. Alright, so I'm going to start here in this bottom corner and walk you all the way around the edge of his legs. That'll be a pretty easy way to help you, and then you can get started on your monster. If you have any questions, we will have somebody in the room to help you. But we wanted to make these videos so that we could walk you through them without having to have somebody be able to stop and give you all of the directions anytime someone new comes in. You can watch this video through the end, you and everybody else at your table currently, especially if you're working on the same craft together. If you want to sit at a different table, you'll most likely be watching a video for another craft. It just keeps things consistent in the midst of our Halloween chaos. All right, we're gonna match up our fabric as best we can anyway. And I'm gonna show you how to start a blanket stitch. So we wanna go through the front piece of fabric. You see there's two pieces of fabric here. We go through the front piece. We wanna go like a decent amount inside. You don't have to stitch, depending on your fabric, super far in, but I do recommend it, especially if you're like me and you want to put lots of stuffing in your little monster. So then after we've got our first stitch, our first thread, you're gonna wanna try to find the same hole again, or as close to it as you can. Nailed it. And then you're gonna pull your thread through. This is one thing I don't like about floss. It likes to wrap around itself. So do be wary. And then the first thing you're gonna wanna do, I find it's easiest to go ahead and get your finger in the loop. And then you're gonna wanna come back around from the back. I go around from the back every single time. It makes your stitches consistent, it makes the lock way more efficient, and it's just easier to keep in mind. That's where we're starting our first stitch, for me anyway. And then the second stitch, especially down here in a corner, just go through the same one again. It'll make this first stitch on the actual opening nice and tight. And you want to kind of direct the thread where you want it to go. If I can get my finger on it. There we go. Well, now, what are you doing? Yeah, there. And there we go. You can see we have our first stitch. And then we'll just continue going around. I suggest leaving some space between, and you don't have to worry about things being perfectly even or anything like that. A blanket stitch is very forgiving, but you do want to be wary of your fabric. Some fabric might be a little bit more prone to fraying, and so going a little bit further in is going to be better for your monster and the longevity of your fabric staying, especially with stuffing. So mine are gonna be a little bit oddly spaced for this monster. Whoa. Trying to watch this in the camera while also stitching is a little bit challenging. I want to make sure that you guys can see this. I know it looks a little bit hectic as I'm pulling the thread through, but it locks in on itself and it keeps the fabric together at the top here. So we're gonna keep going. And as you're going, just make sure to adjust your fabric so that it stays fairly even throughout. That one's gonna be far apart, but it's okay. This makes a nice consistent stitch, and you get into a really good rhythm the further you go in to stitching. When you go to end a stitch, like if you're running out of thread or you want to switch colors, which you are perfectly able to do with a blanket stitch, it is easy. You just end your stitch. Oh, of course. Come back here. Would you stop falling out of here? You're ruining my life. Yep, okay. To start a blanket stitch, I think I'm not sure where I left off. Lord help me. Okay. I know I showed you guys how to end a blanket stitch. I went a few back, you knot it. For all intents and purposes, I'm not going to knot it. I kind of messed up a little bit. I didn't hit record. So I went ahead and finished or started another stitch. So you're gonna pick up with a new stitch. You'll be knotted in the back. So you'll go through your front piece of fabric, through the last hole, the front fabric, through the last hole that you made, or close enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. You'll pull up, and then you'll go through the hole again on both pieces of fabric this time. And remember, and then you'll go through the back again. No, we don't want to rope his leg up. And then you'll pull through. And there's your new stitch, and you can continue your blanket stitch. Hopefully you do so a little bit better than I do. Okay, here we go. And then you carry on, and it's all good. I highly recommend stuffing legs and arms first, or sewing legs and arms first, and then stuffing. It just makes it a lot easier as you go. These are smaller, so you'll need less stuffing. But whenever you are doing arms and legs, I recommend tearing it apart and making it way smaller and thinner, and then just absolutely hammering it in so that they're nice and fluffy. I would do this part first and then go out here, and then I would stuff from the top, and then I would finish his head and stuff everything in there, and you're all set. If you have any questions, you can absolutely ask one of the staff out here. But this is a pretty do-it-yourself, simple. You can use your imagination. You can do mouths, you can do eyes, you can do ears. Anything that you want to do with your monster is up to you. Have fun, and happy Halloween.